For the latest, Zaka, what is it that you are hearing? It's going to be a long, long night now with most of the states still going through the polling and a lot of people coming out there. What do you make of the huge turnout? What does that signify, Zaka, with such a huge turnout of people coming out there and a very energized group who are coming out there to vote the next president of the United States of America?
Well, generally when there is a high turnout, it shows that A, it's a close election. It shows that both sides are motivated and enthused enough to come out. The question is, which side is more enthused? Which side turned up in larger numbers? And I think there is some anecdotal evidence, and I want to stress on the fact that this is anecdotal, in the queues that we're seeing in Philadelphia, for example, in parts of Georgia and Atlanta City and the suburbs of Atlanta, etc., you are seeing queues of younger people. Now, the assumption is that the younger people want to break for Kamala Harris much more than they want to break for Donald Trump. They see her as a younger candidate. She's 60, he's 78. There's almost 20 years between the two of them. She is seen as a candidate who appeals to Gen Z a lot more. I think the critical thing to watch out for is she running up the same numbers as Joe Biden did in places like Georgia, in places like Pennsylvania? Wisconsin and Michigan haven't closed yet. We will get to that in just a second. 8 o'clock local time, 5 minutes past 8 p.m. Eastern here in Washington, D.C. I'm at the Howard University where you can hear the music blaring. This is Kamala Harris's alma mater. She's expected to be here at some point in the night. We don't know when exactly. But at the top of every hour, you will have CNN projections. Just a couple of minutes ago, you had that on the big screen here, and people were screaming out loud every time CNN said that they were projecting a particular state to go to Kamala Harris. But I think the critical thing is going to be which are the battlegrounds. Right now, for example, CNN, very, very early polling, it is showing Kamala Harris ahead in North Carolina. I don't think that that's how it'll end in the night. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. This is a state that Biden did not win in 2020. A lot of African American vote in North Carolina. Also badly affected by Hurricane Helen. So which way that state might go is interesting to watch. Georgia, very important. Remember, Biden flipped Georgia 4 years ago, but by a razor-thin margin, by barely 12,000 votes. It is a traditional Republican stronghold state. In fact, the last Democrat to win Georgia was way back in 1992. Bill Clinton won Georgia in 1992. Is Harris running similar numbers as Biden did in 2020? If she is, then that's good news going into the blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, because that shows then that she's able to keep the vote at the same level as Biden. And Biden won 6 out of the 7 swing states. So keep an eye out for those numbers in the suburbs of Georgia and the suburbs of North Carolina, because that will portend well as we go later into the night, as we look at Pennsylvania, as we look at Michigan, as we look at Wisconsin. I think the critical factor really, Avantika, is two things. One, are young people enthused enough to turn up for her? Like I said, we did see anecdotal evidence of long queues in college towns.
Yes.
In Lay University, for example, in Pennsylvania, there were long queues of young people waiting to vote. Similarly, in the outskirts of Georgia, in the outskirts of Atlanta, we were seeing a lot of young people, young African Americans, waiting in long queues to vote. Does that translate into more battleground wins for Kamala Harris? That's going to be the critical factor. She's got a much more narrow path to 270. If she does not win North Carolina or Georgia, then all her eggs are in the 3 blue wall states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. But if she does manage to surprise everybody, right now she's leading in Ohio, for example. No one quite expects her to win Ohio. Right now she's leading in North Carolina.
Which
would be
North
very
Carolina,
surprised
which
if she
has
wins
also
North
been a
Carolina.
consistent Republican
But these are
stronghold.
Well, Barack Obama did win North Carolina.
Yes.
Both times in 08 and in 12, he won North Carolina. Of course, Hillary Clinton lost that, and Joe Biden lost North Carolina. But remember, there is a huge presence of African American voters in North Carolina. North Carolina was badly affected by Hurricane Helen. Again, Trump did not really cover himself in glory in all the sort of mudslinging that he did excuse me, around Hurricane Helen and the government's relief efforts in Hurricane Helen. But be that as it may, again, I would be very surprised if a Democrat, if Kamala Harris manages to win North Carolina. It wouldn't be impossible. Like I said, Barack Obama won it both in 08 and in 12. But I would be surprised if Kamala Harris wins North Carolina. What it does, though, is, and this is the important thing, if she manages to win North Carolina, she is not as dependent then on Michigan and Wisconsin, or even Pennsylvania for that matter. It opens up multiple paths for her to get to 270. I think that is the important thing. If she does not win North Carolina or Georgia, then she's all in on the three states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. She has to win all three. Otherwise, she will not win the presidency.
Zaka, while you speak about the importance of these states, the battleground states that historically has played a very decisive role in determining the outcome of a US presidential election, I wanted to speak to you a little bit more about the issues. Kamala Harris has emerged as the champion of women's rights. She has prioritized productive rights, something that you had been also speaking to your guests. She's also spoken very passionately about gender equality, very popular amongst the youth as well. But why is it that many young men, American men, even Indian American men, they see Trump as being a more effective advocate for economic stability and prosperity?
Oh, I think that's a great question. I think it's all relative, right? People are feeling the brunt of economic pain. COVID has been a massive disruptor. The economy's taken a huge beating post-COVID and hasn't quite recovered to the pre-COVID level. So there's a lot of disaffection, and particularly amongst young men, when it comes to the cost of living crisis, when it comes to cost of housing, for example, finding good jobs. Today, college graduates are finding it harder to find good jobs and to start a new life. Student loan debt is a huge problem. And somehow Trump has been able to speak to those concerns, to those angers and frustrations much more than Harris has been able to. Of course, Harris is beset by the fact that she's also the incumbent, or at least one half of the incumbent ticket, because she was vice president for the last 4 years. So she cannot denounce or distance herself from Joe Biden's policies over the last 4 years. I mean, the question that the Republican camp is always asking her is, if she has all of these economic ideas and opportunity economy that she keeps talking about, why didn't she do it in the last 4 years that she was in the White House, that she was vice president? So therein, I think, lies a delicate balance for Kamala Harris. She has projected herself as the younger candidate, the candidate of change, the one who wants to move forward, wants to leave behind the chaos of the Donald Trump years, the last 10 years behind, and turn a new chapter. So that's her pitch. At the same time, she cannot distance herself entirely from the last 4 years of the Biden White House, because she was there at the bottom of the ticket. She was the vice president for the last 4 years. So she will be held accountable, at least in some measure, for the economic mess that a lot of people perceive themselves to be in today's America. It's not like the top line numbers are bad. You know, GDP is pretty all right.
Exactly.
The stock markets
Yes.
are booming. Even the jobs numbers are pretty okay. But it's what you feel. I think young people, particularly young men in America, are not feeling like, you know, their condition is better off today than it was 4 years ago. And Trump, you're right, has managed to speak to those fears, to address those concerns in his own, you know, very macho, very alpha male kind of way. Something that the Harris campaign is aware of, did try to reach out, but I think Trump has a way of sort of cutting through to that young male audience much more than Harris has.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. In fact, by various metrics, the U.S. economy right now seems to be on a pretty solid ground. Zaka, I wanted to understand from you, this entire election campaign in the United States has been full of twists and turns. Kamala Harris's very dramatic entrance and the shock exit of Joe Biden. But if we speak of Trump, I mean, he's a deeply polarizing figure, and yet he remains such a dominant force in American politics despite a string of indictments, criminal conviction, scams, and 2 assassination attempts on him. What makes him so relevant in US politics even after a good 9 years? I mean, he has, if I'm not mistaken, remained stable all year with an approval rating of 40% and above.